Only in America would a black woman think she's worth $700 million. Xiaoming's laughter ripped through the room like a chainsaw, the translation so smooth that the foreign investors snickered right along with him. He leaned back in his ridiculously expensive silk chair, smirking at Naomi Ellison as if she were some kind of decorative piece, not the brilliant architect of the empire he was practically begging to merge with his. "Our servant looks a little tense," he added in Mandarin, the words dripping with lazy cruelty. He even used the phrase, "Hey, Nu Yong Run, black servant," letting it roll off his tongue with a disgusting ease. What he didn't realize, what none of them realized, was that Naomi understood every single word. You wouldn't have known it from looking at her, though. Her expression didn't change even a fraction of an inch. They all thought they were laughing at a powerless woman, a pawn in their game. But they were dead wrong. They were seconds away from her pulling the plug on a $700 million deal that would bury them all under the weight of their own arrogance. Before we get any further, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and make sure you hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's story is one you definitely don't want to miss. The sleek private jet sliced through the clouds like a hot knife through butter as Dr. Naomi Ellison studied the merger documents for what felt like the 100th time. Her reading glasses sat perched perfectly on her nose as she flipped through the pages, each one representing a critical piece of the $700 million deal with Shao Industries. The cabin lights cast a warm, inviting glow across the polished table, highlighting her impeccably tailored navy suit and the slight, almost imperceptible furrow in her brow. "Dr. Ellison," Kiana Brooks called from the seat across from her. "You've been staring at those papers for 6 hours straight. Maybe it's time for a break?" Naomi looked up, her dark eyes sharp and alert despite the incredibly long flight. "You know what my mother always said about breaks, Kiana?" She straightened the papers with practiced precision, the movement economical and precise. "Predators hunt the moment you blink." Kiana nodded, a look of understanding in her eyes. At 28, she'd already seen more than enough of corporate America to know the absolute truth in those words. "Your mother sounds like a very wise woman. Cleaning other people's houses taught her more about real power than any MBA program ever could." Naomi's fingers traced the sharp edge of the contract. She'd seen firsthand how the powerful really act when they think nobody's watching, when they believe they're untouchable. The jet began its smooth descent into Beijing Capital International Airport. Through the window, the sprawling city emerged from beneath the clouds, a dazzling maze of ultramodern skyscrapers interwoven with ancient traditions that stretched back centuries. Naomi slipped the documents back into her expensive leather briefcase, each movement deliberate, controlled, and purposeful. "Their heir apparent will be meeting us," Kiana said, glancing down at her tablet. "Xiao Ming, Harvard MBA, took over their international division 3 years ago." "And what's not in the official bio?" Naomi asked, although she already knew the answer. 3 harassment complaints buried by Daddy's high-priced lawyers, 2 ex-wives who signed NDAs thicker than phone books, and a general reputation for. Kiana paused, carefully choosing her words. "Traditional views about leadership." Naomi's lip curved ever so slightly. "Traditional? That's a polite way of saying he doesn't think women should be running companies, especially not black women." The jet touched down smoothly, taxiing to a private terminal where a small welcoming party waited on the tarmac. Through the window, Naomi spotted the camera's first local press, all carefully pre-selected by Shao Industries' PR team. Then she saw him, Xiao Ming, standing front and center in a suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. "Game face," Naomi murmured, rising gracefully from her seat. She checked her reflection in a compact mirror, ensuring that every single hair was perfectly in place, her makeup flawless. In this world, perfection isn't just vanity. It's armor. The cabin door opened, and Beijing's crisp autumn air rushed in to greet them. Naomi descended the stairs with practiced grace and poise, Kiana 2 steps behind her, ever vigilant. Camera shutters clicked rapidly, recording every single moment of the American CEO's arrival. Xiaoming stepped forward, his smile too wide, too practiced, too fake. He was handsome in that polished, almost manufactured way of men who were born into obscene wealth, every feature carefully arranged to project an image of unearned authority. He extended his hand, and Naomi took it. His grip lingered a beat too long, his fingers pressing a little too hard into her skin with subtle dominance. "Dr. Ellison," he said, his English flawless from years of expensive private schools in America. "What a pleasure!" Asterisk, so they sent the diversity hire herself. Asterisk, the cameras kept clicking. Naomi's smile never wavered, even though she felt her jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. Around them, his entourage pretended not to hear, their faces carefully blank, betraying nothing. The comment hung in the air like a thick cloud of smoke, impossible to grab onto, but undeniably there. "Mr. Shao," she replied, her voice as smooth and deceptively sweet as silk. "Thank you for the warm welcome. Shall we discuss the future of energy innovation?" He laughed, a hollow sound that didn't reach his cold, calculating eyes. "Of course, always straight to business with Americans. My father is very eager to meet you." His gaze slid over her in a way that had absolutely nothing to do with business and everything to do with blatant disrespect. They walked toward the waiting cars, a sleek fleet of black luxury vehicles with darkly tinted windows. Kiana stayed close, her tablet at the ready, her posture alert and watchful. She'd seen that predatory look in Ming's eyes, too, and knew exactly what it meant. In the back of the lead car, Naomi finally allowed herself to move her hand, carefully wiping it against a tissue. The scent of his cloying cologne, far too strong and far too assertive, clung to her skin like a warning. "Did you get that on record?" she asked Kiana quietly, barely above a whisper. "Audio and video," Kiana confirmed, her voice equally hushed. "Although they'll probably try to say it was a simple translation issue. They always do." Naomi watched the bustling Beijing streets blur past the window. Modern buildings reached for the sky, their glass surfaces reflecting a city that was racing headlong toward the future. But some things, unfortunately, remained stubbornly stuck in the distant past. "One wrong word from him," she whispered, more to herself than to Kiana, "and this entire deal dies." The tissue in her hand crumpled ever so slightly, the only outward sign of the unyielding steel that lay beneath her composed exterior. She'd faced men like Xiao Ming before, men who saw her very position as a personal affront to what they believed was the natural order, men who arrogantly assumed that her success must have been a gift rather than something she'd earned through sheer grit and determination. Men who wholeheartedly believed that power was their birthright. But they never seemed to learn. Power wasn't inherited. It was built brick by painstaking brick, decision by painstaking decision, sacrifice by painful sacrifice. And Naomi Ellison had built herself into someone who could shake the foundations of entire empires with a single, carefully chosen word. The car glided to a smooth stop outside Zhao Industries' imposing headquarters, a towering testament to obscene wealth and unchecked influence. As Naomi gathered her briefcase, she caught her reflection in the darkly tinted window. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, clear as a bell. Asterisk baby, sometimes the best revenge is simply letting them think they've already won, right up until the very moment they lose absolutely everything. The polished marble floors of Zhao Industries' headquarters echoed with each measured step as Naomi followed Ming through long corridors that screamed old money. Everything gleamed, the walls, the floors, even the anxious faces of the impeccably dressed assistants who bowed as they passed. Their footsteps created a steady, rhythmic beat against the cold stone, like a slow countdown to something inevitable. "Our company history spans 3 generations," Ming announced with a flourish, gesturing to a long wall lined with portraits. Each frame contained the same basic image. Stern-faced men in dark, impeccably tailored suits, their expressions carved from the same unyielding stone as the very building itself. "My grandfather started with a single coal mine. Now we power half of Asia." Naomi studied each portrait carefully, noting the subtle progression of wealth in the cut of their suits, the growing arrogance and confidence in their poses. "Impressive legacy," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Very impressive," Ming agreed. his smile as sharp and dangerous as broken glass. We believe in traditional values here. Strong leadership, a clear hierarchy. He paused meaningfully before a particularly large portrait. My father, Chairman Jiao, he taught me that success comes from maintaining order, from knowing one's place. The emphasis on the word place wasn't even remotely subtle. Neither was the way his eyes flicked over to her, carefully measuring her reaction. In America, he continued, switching abruptly to Mandarin, they seem to think that anyone can lead, even if they lack the proper background. He smiled wider, certain that she couldn't understand a word he was saying. It's like putting a monkey in silk robes. Naomi's face remained perfectly composed, although her fingers tightened almost imperceptibly on her briefcase. The calculated insult hung in the air, wrapped in the false security of a foreign tongue. They reached a set of ornate doors, where Chairman Jiao waited to greet them with an entourage of high-powered executives. The chairman was everything his portrait suggested. Elegant, reserved, radiating an aura of quiet, almost understated authority. He bowed slightly, perfectly polite, but his cold, calculating eyes never quite met Naomi's directly. Dr. Ellison, he said, his English careful and precise. Welcome to our humble home. The opulent boardroom could never, under any circumstances, be accurately described as humble. A massive table of polished rosewood dominated the spacious room, surrounded by leather chairs that probably cost more than most people's cars. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a commanding view of Beijing's sprawling skyline. The bustling city spread out beneath them like an expansive kingdom. Lunch was served as they began to discuss preliminary terms. Delicate dim sum, premium tea, every single detail orchestrated to project an image of wealth, power, and absolute control. Naomi couldn't help but notice how the serving staff kept their eyes down, how they seemed to fade seamlessly into the walls between courses, almost invisible. The American market is proving to be quite challenging. One of the senior executives remarked with a dismissive wave of his hand, helping himself to more tea. So many regulations. So many endless demands for representation. He chuckled, a dry, brittle sound like ice cracking. And the women there, such strong opinions, such loud voices. Several other executives joined in his hollow laughter, creating a chorus of artificial amusement. Chairman Jiao's face remained carefully neutral, but Naomi caught a subtle flicker of something that looked suspiciously like approval in his eyes. Ming didn't even bother trying to hide his smug smirk. Naomi set down her delicate teacup with precise control. Volume rarely correlates with actual impact, she said, her voice carrying the full weight of every hard-earned degree she'd ever received, every seemingly insurmountable barrier she'd ever shattered. True power speaks for itself. Her eyes met those of the condescending executives, and the laughter abruptly died in their throats. Something in her unwavering gaze, the quiet certainty, the unshakable dignity that radiated from her, seemed to turn the temperature in the room several degrees colder. The silence that followed felt like a vacuum, sucking the smugness right off their faces. Chairman Jiao cleared his throat, breaking the tension. Shall we review the proposed timeline for the merger? The meeting continued, but the atmosphere had shifted palpably. Naomi noticed how they began watching her more carefully, like men who had suddenly realized they might be standing on unexpectedly thin ice. Hours later, back in her hotel suite, Naomi stood at the window, watching Beijing's dazzling lights flicker to life. The city looked different from this incredible height, less intimidating, somehow more vulnerable. She pulled out her cell phone and quickly dialed Kiana's room. "Did you get everything?" she asked when Kiana answered. "Every single word," Kiana confirmed. "Both languages, including Ming's charming monkey comment." Naomi's reflection smiled back at her from the darkened window. "Good. They seem to think that speaking Mandarin makes them invisible. That's exactly what we need." "The chairman's a lot more careful than his son," Kiana observed. "But that comment he made about loud women shows exactly what they really think of us." Naomi touched the cool glass, her fingertip tracing the sharp outline of the Jiao Industries building in the distance. They see our voices as a threat because they've never actually had to fight to be heard. So, what's our play? Naomi watched a plane cut smoothly through the inky night sky, its lights steady and determined. Tomorrow they'll see firsthand just how loud quiet can be. The sprawling city continued to pulse with life below, millions of lives intersecting in countless ways. But up here, in this carefully appointed suite high above the bustling streets, one woman stood perfectly still, her almost eerie silence far more dangerous than any shout could ever be. The dazzling lights of Beijing reflected in her sharp, knowing eyes, and in their glow, she looked less like a visitor and more like a force of nature. Patient, inevitable, and absolutely impossible to stop once set irrevocably in motion. The Zhao family estate sprawled across the outskirts of Beijing like a small, self-contained palace. Its gardens were perfectly manicured, its walls high enough to keep the harsh realities of the outside world at a comfortable and very profitable distance. Inside the main dining hall, crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across the faces of both Eastern and Western guests, all wearing paper-thin masks of forced civility that grew thinner with each passing course. Naomi sat poised and elegant at the center of the long, elaborately set table, her emerald green dress a deliberate choice, power without provocation. The silk caught the light as she reached for her crystal wine glass, each movement carefully measured and exquisitely elegant. She'd learned long ago that in rooms like this, even the seemingly simple act of lifting a fork could be meticulously judged and dissected. Ming held court at the head of the table, his father notably absent due to supposedly pressing business matters. The younger Zhao had loosened his silk tie after his third glass of expensive wine, his carefully cultivated Western manners beginning to subtly slip. "Tell me, Dr. Ellison," he called down the lengthy table, interrupting her perfectly pleasant conversation with a British investor. "Where did you study? Harvard? Yale?" His arrogant tone implied that these were, of course, the only truly acceptable answers. "MIT," Naomi replied simply, watching his reaction with undisguised amusement. "Both degrees." "Both?" Ming's eyebrows rose with exaggerated surprise. "How very fortunate. They must have exceptionally good diversity programs." Several of the Western executives shifted uncomfortably in their plush chairs. A server silently replaced the empty soup bowls with the next course. Shark fin soup, a blatant display of obscene wealth that also doubled as a callous statement about environmental concerns. "The engineering program there was quite competitive," Naomi said, her voice carrying just enough warmth to make her next words cut even deeper. "Merit-based admission, actually, though I imagine that particular concept might be somewhat unfamiliar to some." A few quiet coughs rippled around the table. Ming's smile tightened ever so slightly. Of course," he said, switching abruptly to what he seemed to genuinely believe was a passable African accent, thick and almost caricatured. "We are all very impressed with your many achievements. In America, everyone gets trophy. Yes, everyone wins." Several of the Chinese executives laughed openly. The Western investors managed nervous chuckles, their eyes darting back and forth between Ming and Naomi, carefully measuring the precarious distance between social discomfort and business necessity. Naomi noted each face, each laugh, each cowardly compromise. Her memory was excellent. It had to be, growing up in a world where forgetting who stood with you and who stood against you could literally break you. The soup arrived in elegant, handcrafted bowls, steam rising like restless spirits seeking a desperate escape. Naomi watched the severed fins float lifelessly in the murky broth. Endangered species served with silver spoons. More symbols, more statements. "You know," Ming continued, emboldened by the earlier laughter, "my father was quite worried about this proposed partnership. He said, American companies lack discipline, proper respect for hierarchy." He gestured grandly with his wine glass. "But I told him, sometimes we must adapt to embrace new ways. Yes, even if they are." He paused, searching for the precise word he wanted to use. "Unexpected. Progress often is," Naomi replied, her tone so perfectly pleasant it could have cut glass. "Like sharks, we must keep moving relentlessly forward, or we inevitably die." The soup suddenly seemed far less appetizing to several of the dinner guests. A gentle chime broke the rising tension. Naomi's cell phone sat discreetly beside her expensive plate. She glanced down at the screen, then stood with fluid, almost effortless grace. "Please excuse me," she said politely. "I need to take this rather urgent call." As she turned to gracefully leave the dining hall, Ming leaned toward his closest companions, switching to Mandarin with the casual, arrogant confidence of someone who was absolutely certain that he couldn't possibly be understood. "Hey, New Yong Ren," he said, letting the crude slur roll effortlessly off his tongue. "Black servant." Laughter rippled around the table, starting with the Chinese executives and then spreading uncertainly to some of the more spineless Western guests. The kind of weak laughter that comes from desperately wanting to belong, from the palpable fear of being excluded from Ming's inner circle. Naomi's step faltered for just a fleeting moment. In that brief pause, time seemed to crystallize around her. She could feel her heartbeat, steady and strong, each pulse a vivid reminder of every single moment like this one that she'd ever endured, every forced smile she'd ever maintained while swallowing white-hot rage, every invaluable lesson her mother had ever painstakingly taught her about the critical importance of dignity being her strongest armor. The bright chandelier light caught her exquisite earrings as she smoothly resumed walking, each precise step unhurried and deliberate. The cruel laughter followed her all the way to the door, but it couldn't touch her. She'd learned long ago that true power isn't found in the fleeting ability to hurt others. It's found in the unshakable ability to simply walk away, gathering their mistakes like precious ammunition, patiently waiting for the perfect moment to show them exactly who they'd so foolishly underestimated. The heavy dining room door closed softly behind her with a quiet click that somehow seemed louder than all the boisterous laughter combined. In the long hallway, surrounded by ancient Chinese artifacts worth millions of dollars, Naomi stood perfectly still. She didn't clench her fists in anger, or allow her impeccably composed face to betray even the slightest hint of emotion. Instead, she took one deep, cleansing breath, then another, each one fueling the unyielding fire of unwavering determination that had carried her all the way from a small, modest house in Atlanta to this pivotal moment. The cell phone in her hand hadn't actually rung. It was simply a tool like absolutely everything else. The strategically chosen dress, the perfectly practiced smile, even this meticulously planned strategic retreat. Each piece carefully chosen, each moment flawlessly choreographed toward an end that they couldn't yet see coming. Behind those closed doors, they were still laughing, still certain of their inherent superiority, still wholeheartedly believing that power was best measured in thoughtless cruelty and obscene wealth. They couldn't hear her potent silence, couldn't possibly recognize it for what it truly was. Not meek submission, but the deceptive calm before an inevitable storm. They would soon learn, as so very many others had learned before them, that grossly underestimating Naomi Ellison was like carelessly mistaking a sleeping lion for a harmless house cat. A potentially fatal mistake that you only get to make once. Naomi smoothed her elegant dress, checked her unwavering reflection in a gilded mirror, and then deliberately pushed open the heavy wooden doors of the dining room. The cruel laughter that had followed her out abruptly died mid-breath. She calmly moved back to her designated seat with measured grace, every single eye in the grand room tracking her fluid movement. Ming was still wearing his self-satisfied, smug smile, although it flickered ever so slightly when she met his gaze directly. The shark fin soup had grown conspicuously cold, crystalline patterns beginning to form on its gelatinous surface like a thin layer of fragile ice on a still pond. "My sincerest apologies for the interruption," Naomi said in perfect Mandarin, her crisp pronunciation ringing clear and true. "I simply wanted to properly thank you for this absolutely excellent meal." The utter silence that followed was deafening. Ming's face drained of color so quickly that he seemed to visibly age years in mere seconds. Around the long table, expressions shifted dramatically from confusion to dawning horror as they slowly realized the sheer magnitude of their colossal mistake. A wine glass toppled over, spreading crimson red across the pristine white linen tablecloth like spilled blood. "Dr. Ellison," Ming stammered nervously in English. "I didn't realize." Clearly, Naomi continued flawlessly in Mandarin, her voice carrying to every single corner of the shocked room. Although I am rather curious, would it have truly mattered? Would knowing that I understood your every word have actually stopped you from so carelessly showing everyone exactly who you really are? She stood slowly and deliberately, placing her embroidered napkin neatly beside her plate with painstaking care. I actually spent 2 incredibly formative years at Shanghai University's prestigious graduate program. My Mandarin professor always said that I possessed a truly rare gift for subtly nuanced tones, for catching the incredibly subtle nuances that others might easily miss. Her razor-sharp smile was ice-cold. The increasingly nervous Western executives were shifting uncomfortably in their seats, acutely sensing the rising tension in the room even without fully understanding the exact words that were being spoken. The Chinese executives sat frozen in stunned silence, their earlier boisterous laughter now trapped like a lump in their constricted throats. As CEO of Ellison Global Renewables, she switched back to flawless English, ensuring that absolutely everyone would now fully understand precisely what came next. I am hereby terminating all merger negotiations with Zhao Industries, effective immediately. She paused dramatically, letting the full weight of her devastating words sink in completely. A servant doesn't sign billion-dollar partnerships. She ends them. Chairs scraped loudly against the cold marble floors as people rose abruptly in near panic. Ming shot to his feet, his face now flushed with desperate, impotent anger. You cannot do this. The contracts are still unsigned. Naomi cut him off sharply. And they will remain so. She turned to address the entire room. I highly suggest that everyone check their cell phones. My dedicated team is releasing a detailed statement to the press as we speak, along with, of course, some rather entertaining recordings of tonight's dinner. A chorus of urgent notification chimes filled the tense air as if on a perfectly timed cue. Cell phones emerged quickly from pockets and expensive purses like colorful flowers blooming in accelerated motion. The distinct sound of multiple sharp intakes of breath followed. You recorded us? Ming's voice cracked with disbelief. That's completely illegal. In China, perhaps. Naomi agreed smoothly. But in all of my company's international business meetings, it is standard operating policy to diligently maintain complete and comprehensive records for total transparency. It's all clearly stated in our preliminary agreements, the ones that you clearly didn't bother to read very carefully. Another unfortunate mistake. She began walking gracefully toward the ornate door, her expensive heels clicking sharply against the cold marble floor in the stunned silence. Oh, and Mr. Zhao. She turned back briefly. The next time you feel the overwhelming urge to insult someone, you might want to check their credentials very carefully first. MIT has an absolutely excellent international program. The entire room erupted into utter chaos behind her. Voices were raised in multiple languages. Mandarin, English, French, and German, all filled with the same unmistakable note of rising panic. $700 million were evaporating like morning dew under the blazing sun, and with them went countless hard-won careers and carefully cultivated reputations. In the grand foyer, Kiana was waiting patiently with Naomi's coat, her sharp, observant eyes bright with barely contained excitement, her own cell phone already buzzing continuously in her hand. The car's ready, Kiana said with a knowing smile, holding the coat open for her. And the press release went officially live just 2 minutes ago. It's already trending globally. They walked out into the cool Beijing night, leaving the cacophony of escalating disorder far behind them. The garden's carefully arranged stones and manicured trees seemed to gently bow in the refreshing evening breeze, as if acknowledging their purposeful passage. The limousine door closed with a solid, reassuring thunk, sealing them inside the climate-controlled quiet. Kiana's cell phone continued to vibrate furiously, headlines flashing rapidly across its small screen faster than she could even read them. Ellison Global cancels major Chinese merger. Shock at Zhao Industries dinner. Deal collapses amidst racist remarks. 700 million energy deal torpedoed. Through the darkly tinted windows, the Zhao family estate's distant lights grew smaller and smaller. Its meticulously manicured grounds slowly receded into the enveloping darkness. Naomi watched it all disappear, her composed face illuminated only by the passing city street lights, each fleeting flash revealing the same unwavering expression of controlled composure that she'd worn all evening. Social media is absolutely exploding, Kiana reported, scrolling rapidly through her various feeds. The recording is already everywhere. CNN is calling for an official comment, so is Bloomberg. The Wall Street Journal wants an exclusive interview. She finally looked up from her glowing screen. What exactly should I tell them? Naomi continued staring out the window, watching Beijing's ultra-modern skyline rise majestically before them. All glass, steel, and unabashed ambition. Good, she said simply. Let them talk. In the clear reflection of the window, she could see her own determined face superimposed over the bright city lights, clear-eyed, unshaken, exactly as her mother had always taught her to be. In her sharp mind, she could almost hear her mother's unwavering voice. Baby, sometimes the biggest victory of all is just walking away with your head held high. The limousine glided smoothly through the night, carrying them swiftly toward the airport where the company jet waited patiently on the tarmac. Behind them, an entire empire built on unearned arrogance was now learning a particularly expensive lesson about the very real dangers of underestimating the wrong person. Ahead, explosive headlines were already spreading rapidly across the entire globe, carrying not just the breaking news of a spectacularly failed deal, but also a potent message about true power, respect, and the inevitably high cost of casual cruelty. The Beijing sunrise painted the sprawling city in vibrant shades of amber and burnished gold, but Naomi had been wide awake long before dawn even began to break. She stood motionless at her luxury hotel suite's floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the scrolling digital stock tickers that ran constantly across the sides of the massive skyscrapers. Ellison Global stock was flashing in angry red, down a staggering 12% and still falling sharply. Far below, a dense swarm of reporters clustered anxiously around the hotel's main entrance like disturbed bees swarming around their hive. Burly security guards formed a solid human barrier, working tirelessly to keep the persistent press at bay. Camera flashes punctuated the early morning light, even from 30 floors up. They're saying it's potentially the biggest deal collapse in clean energy history, Kiana said from her hastily established command post at the dining table, surrounded by tablets and laptops. She clearly hadn't slept either. Her usually pristine blazer was slightly wrinkled, and empty coffee cups were scattered haphazardly around her makeshift workstation. Chinese social media is completely split between outrage and, well, even more outrage. But Western news outlets are already calling it a watershed moment for corporate accountability. Naomi's cell phone buzzed again. The 20th persistent call from David Levin in the past hour alone. She'd been pointedly ignoring all of them, but this time she decided to finally pick up. The video call connected almost instantly, revealing her CFO's increasingly frantic face, flushed with barely contained fury. "Do you even have any idea what you've just done?" David's exasperated voice crackled loudly through the speaker. His usually perfectly combed hair was completely disheveled, and his expensive collar was askew. "The entire board is in complete chaos. Our major investors are panicking. You needlessly humiliated them." "Good morning to you too, David." Naomi's icy tone was winter cold. "I trust that you've seen the now viral recording." "Of course I've seen it. Absolutely everyone has seen it. But you simply cannot tank a $700 million deal over a few completely idiotic racist comments." "A few racist comments?" Naomi's eyebrow arched almost imperceptibly. "Is that what you're calling it now?" "What are we calling it now? And here I thought you were the one who taught me about protecting shareholder value through reputation management." David's face reddened further. "This isn't about reputation. This is about—" He stopped, seeming to catch himself. "Look, we can still salvage this. Ming's father is willing to meet. We can renegotiate." "Interesting timing for that suggestion." Naomi cut in. "Speaking of negotiations, would you care to explain why new patent transfer clauses appeared in the contract overnight? The ones that weren't in the version I reviewed on the flight?" David blinked rapidly, his hand reaching up to adjust his tie. "There must be some mistake. Perhaps a translation error in a contract drafted by our own legal team. Naomi's voice was dangerously soft. Try again, David. I'll have to check with legal, but Naomi, please just focus on the bigger picture here. The board meeting is in 4 hours, and they're going to want answers. Oh, they'll get answers. Naomi ended the call mid-sentence, turning to Kiana. What did you find? Kiana's fingers flew across her keyboard, pulling up a complex web of financial diagrams. Took all night, but I found it. The new patent clauses. They're connected to a series of shell companies registered in the Cayman Islands. She highlighted a particular node in the network. This one was established 3 weeks ago, right after our first meeting with Zhao Industries. And guess who's listed as the beneficial owner? Ming, Naomi said, not a question. Through 6 layers of corporate veils, but yes. Kiana pulled up another document. The clauses would have given them backdoor access to our core solar panel technology. They could have replicated our entire production line within 6 months. Naomi moved to stand behind Kiana, studying the diagrams. Years of experience reading financial structures let her see the theft attempt hidden in the legitimate-looking paperwork. It was elegant in its complexity, she had to admit. If she hadn't caught Ming's insult, if she hadn't killed the deal, they weren't just trying to partner with us, she said quietly. They were planning to gut us, take our technology, replicate it cheaper, and push us out of the Asian market entirely. She straightened up, smoothing her jacket. And someone on our side helped them set it up. David? Kiana asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. The timing of the contract changes, the rushed closing schedule, the way he's pushing to salvage the deal, even after what happened. Naomi shook her head. He's been their man from the start. We just need to prove it. A knock at the door made them both turn. A hotel staff member entered with a silver breakfast tray, complete with fresh coffee and pastries. As she set it down, Naomi noticed her hands trembling slightly. Pardon, Dr. Ellison, the young woman said in careful English, but security asked me to inform you. There are now over 50 reporters in the lobby. They're requesting statements. Thank you, Naomi replied with a warm smile. And thank you for bringing breakfast despite the crowd. After the staff member left, Kiana stood up, stretching muscles stiff from hours of computer work. What's our next move? Naomi walked back to the window. The morning sun had risen fully now, glinting off the steel and glass towers of Beijing's financial district. Somewhere in one of those buildings, Ming was probably scrambling to contain the damage, never suspecting they'd discovered the real plot hidden behind his racist bluster. They called me servant while trying to steal my crown, Naomi said, her reflection in the window overlaying the city like a ghost. Now we take theirs. She turned to Kiana. Start with David's emails from the past month. Every contact, every meeting, every document he's touched. If he helped them set this up, he left tracks somewhere. Kiana was already typing. And Ming. He wanted to play with racism and corporate theft. Naomi's smile was sharp as a blade's edge. Let's show him what happens when you try both against the wrong person. The morning news cycle hit like a tsunami. Naomi watched from her hotel room as talking heads dissected her every move, her every word from the fateful dinner. On CNN, a commentator with perfectly coiffed hair shook his head solemnly. Sources close to the negotiation suggest Dr. Ellison may have misinterpreted cultural differences, he said. This emotional response could cost shareholders billions. Naomi muted the TV, her finger pressing the button with controlled force. Her phone buzzed constantly with notifications. Social media was having a field day. The messages ranged from concern to cruel, with an ugly undercurrent of racism threading through many of them. They're calling you unstable on WeChat, Kiana reported, scrolling through her tablet. And Twitter? Well, you don't want to know what's trending. Let me guess. Hashtag angry black woman. Naomi's voice was dry as dust. Among others. Kiana's face darkened. The trolls are out in force. I've had to shut down comments on all our corporate social media. Naomi stood, walking to her closet. She pulled out a simple black sweater and jeans, clothes that would help her blend in rather than stand out. I need some air. You can't go out there, Kiana protested, The media is still camped downstairs and security says, I didn't survive 2 decades in corporate America without learning how to move unseen. Naomi pulled her hair back into a tight bun, added large sunglasses and a surgical mask, common enough in Beijing that it wouldn't draw attention. Keep monitoring the situation. I'll be back in 2 hours. The service elevator deposited her in the hotel's kitchen area. A few workers glanced her way, but in her plain clothes, she was just another foreigner trying to avoid attention. She slipped out through the loading dock and into the bustling streets of Beijing's business district. All around her, life continued as normal. Street vendors hawked their wares. Office workers hurried between skyscrapers. Tourists snapped photos of the modern architecture. But in cafes and on street corners, she caught fragments of conversation. Her Mandarin picked up whispers that made her jaw clench. That American woman lost face over nothing. These foreigners so sensitive. In a high-end coffee shop, 2 young executives in sharp suits didn't bother to lower their voices as she passed their table. Who does she think she is? One said in Mandarin, these Americans, especially the black ones, they don't understand how to do business here. His companion laughed. Ming Jiao was right. Too emotional, no control. Naomi ordered her coffee in perfect Mandarin, watching their faces pale as they realized she'd understood every word. She took her drink to a corner table, opening her phone to find Ming's face plastered across Chinese business news sites. His official statement was a masterpiece of subtle condescension. While we respect Dr. Ellison's passion, her emotional reaction to standard business negotiations raises concerns about her ability to operate in international markets. We remain open to dialogue once cooler heads prevail. The translation didn't capture all the nuances. The way his choice of words in Mandarin painted her as hysterical, unstable, out of her depth. The comments below the articles were worse. A cesspool of racist and sexist vitriol barely disguised as business criticism. Her phone buzzed with a message from the board. They were deeply concerned about the situation and requested an emergency meeting. Another buzz, share prices dropping. Another, a major investor threatening to pull out. Naomi walked back to the hotel through darkening streets, watching her own face flash on digital billboards between advertisements. The story had legs now, spinning beyond her control. In the space of 24 hours, she'd gone from respected CEO to cautionary tale. The hotel lobby was mercifully clear of reporters when she returned, though she could see them still camped outside the main entrance. She took the service elevator again, her mind already mapping out strategies for the board meeting. The corridor to her suite was empty and quiet, too quiet. Her security training kicked in before her conscious mind registered what was wrong. She slowed her steps, scanning for any sign of disturbance. There, a shadow under her door that shouldn't be there. A piece of paper slid through while she was out. Naomi approached cautiously, her hands sliding into her purse, where a small but powerful stun gun lay hidden. The note was printed on expensive paper, the kind used for business cards. The message was in English, each word carefully chosen. You dishonor yourself by staying. Leave China by tomorrow night or bleed here. Some lessons must be taught harshly. Naomi picked up the note with a tissue, preserving any possible fingerprints. Inside her suite, she checked every room, every closet, every possible hiding place. Nothing was disturbed, but the message was clear. They could reach her whenever they wanted. She double-checked the door's bolt, then moved a chair under the handle for good measure. From her purse, she withdrew the stun gun, a gift from her head of security, who'd insisted she never travel without it. Its weight was reassuring in her hand as she checked the charge indicator. Full power. Try me, she muttered, setting the weapon on her bedside table within easy reach. I faced worse than schoolyard bullies with daddy's money. The Beijing sunrise painted the hotel room in shades of gray and amber. Naomi sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by stacks of printed documents and 3 laptops. Her jacket was draped over a chair, her sleeves rolled up, ready for battle. Kiana worked at the desk, red-flagging suspicious entries in spreadsheets. Dark circles under her eyes betrayed a sleepless night, but her fingers flew over the keyboard with precision. Ling Chan, their translator and tech consultant, sat on the couch with his own laptop, his normally neat hair disheveled from running his hands through it in frustration. Another shell company, Kiana announced, marking a cell in red. This one registered in the Cayman Islands last year. Huge cash transfers. No clear business purpose. Naomi nodded, scanning a document recovered from Zhao Industries' backup servers. Patterns are the same. They create these shells just before major international deals. She touched her temple, fighting a headache. Ling, what's this notation here? Ling leaned forward, squinting at Chinese characters in tiny font. This creative accounting. They're marking bribes as consulting fees to local officials. He pulled at his collar, clearly uncomfortable. These amounts are significant. Track them, Naomi ordered, passing him a USB drive. Every UAN, every recipient. The room fell into focused silence, broken only by keyboard clicks and the rustle of papers. Outside, the city was fully awake, car horns and construction noise filtering through the windows. But up here in their makeshift war room, they were archaeologists unearthing corruption one layer at a time. Got something big, Kiana said after an hour. Factory inspection reports from their solar panel plant in Xinjiang. The numbers don't add up. Ling moved to look over her shoulder, his face paling as he read. These worker manifests. I've seen this before. These aren't employees. They're forced labor. Naomi's head snapped up. You're certain? The language is careful, but... Ling pulled up another document, translating rapidly. See here? Special Worker Integration Program. And these housing costs far below market rate. Because they're prison barracks. Jesus, Kiana whispered. Download everything, Naomi ordered. Every report, every memo, every email chain that mentions those facilities. She stood, pacing the room. No wonder they buried these files so deep. Ling's fingers hesitated over his keyboard. Dr. Ellison, this kind of information. He swallowed hard. People disappear for less. If they trace these breaches back to us. They already threatened me once, Naomi said, touching the note in her pocket. But this isn't about me anymore. She moved to the window, looking out at the sprawling city. How many lives are buried in those spreadsheets? How many families torn apart so Ming can add another zero to his bank account? We should at least wait for legal counsel, Kiana suggested, though her tone said she already knew the answer. Our lawyers are probably compromised, Naomi replied. Remember those patent clauses that appeared overnight? Someone on our side helped them. She turned back to the room, her expression hard. We trust no one outside this room. Ling stood, running both hands through his hair. Dr. Ellison, please understand what you're considering. It won't just hurt Zhao Industries. This could embarrass powerful people, trigger international investigations. He met her eyes. This information can get you killed. Naomi walked to him, her voice softening, but her resolve unchanged. So can silence, Ling. Every day we wait, more lives are destroyed. She touched his shoulder. But I won't force you to stay. You can walk away right now. No questions asked. He looked at the door, then at his laptop screen where damning numbers scrolled past. After a long moment he sat back down. My father taught me that true honor means standing up to powerful men, not bowing to them. His fingers returned to the keyboard. I'm staying. Me too, Kiana said firmly. All in. They worked through the morning, building their case document by document. Fake environmental impact studies, backdated safety certifications, bribes disguised as charitable donations. Every discovery revealed new layers of corruption. A cancer eating at the heart of Zhao's empire. Look at these profit margins, Kiana said, pointing to a graph. No way they're this high without cutting every corner possible. Not just corners, Ling added grimly. Lives, safety, basic human dignity. He rubbed his eyes. The deeper we dig, the worse it gets. Naomi studied a series of photos showing factory conditions. We need more than documents, witnesses, insider testimony. She turned to Ling. Any chance your contacts might? A sharp tap on glass made them all freeze. Across the street, sunlight flashed off a camera lens. A man in a black suit stood in an office window, photographing their room with a long-range camera. Down. Naomi ordered. They dropped to the floor as she crawled to the window, keeping low. The man was already gone, leaving only empty windows reflecting morning light. Close the curtains, she told Kiana. Ling, start encrypting everything we have. Triple protection. She pulled out her phone, typing rapidly. They're watching us now. We need to move fast. The heavy curtains slid shut, plunging the room into artificial twilight. In the dim light, their laptops glowed like campfires, casting shadows on tense faces as they raced to secure their findings before the storm broke. The digital clock on the nightstand blinked 2:03 a.m. in harsh red numbers. Naomi sat at the desk in her hotel room reviewing security footage Kiana had pulled from Zhao Industries servers. Her eyes burned from staring at the screen, but she couldn't sleep. Not with what they'd discovered. A soft click cut through the silence. Naomi's head snapped up. That wasn't the normal settling of the building. Her hand moved toward her purse, where the stun gun waited. The door burst open with a crack of splintering wood. 3 men in black masks rushed in, moving with military precision. The first one lunged for her before she could reach her purse. Naomi grabbed the desk lamp and swung hard. It connected with a satisfying crunch. The man stumbled back, cursing in Mandarin. She kicked the desk chair at the second attacker, buying precious seconds. The third man cornered her by the coffee maker. Without thinking, Naomi grabbed the pot of water she'd been heating for tea and flung the scalding liquid at his face. His scream pierced the air as he clawed at his mask. Glass shattered as they knocked over the side table. Naomi's bare feet crunched on the fragments, but adrenaline dulled the pain. She ducked a wild punch. Years of kickboxing classes taking over. Her elbow found a solar plexus. Someone's nose met her knee. The door connecting to Kiana's room burst open. Her assistant charged in, wielding a wooden chair like a battering ram. She slammed it into the back of the man grappling with Naomi. Run! Naomi shouted, grabbing Kiana's arm. They bolted for the hallway, leaving the men tangled in furniture and cursing. Their bare feet slapped against cold tile as they sprinted for the stairwell. Behind them, heavy footsteps and angry shouts echoed off the walls. Naomi's heart hammered against her ribs. The fire exit felt miles away. They hit the stairwell at full speed, taking the steps 2 at a time. The metal door clanged shut behind them just as the fire alarm began to shriek. Red emergency lights cast everything in a hellish glow. Keep going. Naomi gasped as Kiana stumbled on the 10th floor. Their pursuers were gaining. She could hear them above, their boots thundering on the metal stairs. They burst out of the stairwell on the 4th floor, racing down a service corridor. A cleaning cart provided cover as they caught their breath. Back entrance, Kiana panted, pointing. Through the kitchen. Naomi nodded, her lungs burning. They moved as quietly as they could, bare feet silent on the industrial carpet. Behind them, the fire alarm continued its deafening wail. They made it to the kitchen just as voices shouted in Mandarin from the stairwell. The cold tile against their feet was almost welcome after the rough carpet had scraped their soles raw. There, one of the men spotted them through the kitchen window. Naomi grabbed a pot from the drying rack and hurled it at the window. The crash bought them precious seconds as they darted between steel counters and hanging utensils. They reached the loading dock just as police sirens began wailing in the distance. The night air hit them like a slap, raising goosebumps on their arms. They didn't stop running until they reached the busy street 2 blocks away. Only then did Naomi realize she was shaking. Her silk pajamas were torn and spattered with coffee. Blood trickled from cuts on her feet. Kiana didn't look much better, her t-shirt ripped at the shoulder, hair wild around her face. Are you okay? Naomi asked, grabbing Kiana's shoulders. Yeah, Kiana nodded, still breathing hard. I'll live. Naomi tried to steady her trembling hands. We need to get somewhere safe. They'll be watching my backup hotel. My cousin has an apartment in the university district, Kiana said. She's out of town this week. They found a taxi willing to take them despite their disheveled state. As they drove through the pre-dawn streets, Naomi's phone buzzed with a message from the hotel manager. Police are investigating an apparent robbery attempt. No suspects found. Minimal evidence. They'll bury this, Naomi said quietly. Write it off as common criminals. Those weren't random burglars, Kiana replied. They moved like professionals. Had to be Ming's men. Naomi's jaw clenched. He's desperate to stop us from exposing what we found. The sky was beginning to lighten when they returned to the hotel room with a police escort. The destruction looked even worse in the gray dawn light. Overturned furniture, shattered glass, papers scattered like fallen leaves. Blood drops stained the carpet where Naomi's knee had connected with someone's face. She pulled out her phone, hands still trembling slightly, and began photographing everything. The broken door, the lamp she'd used as a weapon, the coffee stains on the wall. Each image was evidence of how far Ming would go to protect his secrets. They drew first blood, Naomi whispered, lowering her phone. The words tasted like iron in her mouth, like the promise of retribution. The room fell silent except for the click of her camera phone. Morning sun crept through the windows, painting the wreckage in shades of gold and shadow. Each photo was another piece of ammunition in a war that had just turned deadly serious. The private jet hummed steadily as it carried them away from Beijing. Naomi stared out the window, watching China's coastline fade into a distant smudge. Her body ached from the attack, cuts and bruises hidden beneath a crisp business suit. 2 armed security guards sat near the cockpit, a new addition she'd never needed before. Kiana dozed fitfully in the seat across from her, dark circles under her eyes betraying their sleepless nights. They'd barely rested since fleeing to her cousin's apartment, spending hours documenting everything and arranging secure transport home. Ms. Brooks, Naomi said softly, touching her assistant's arm. We're almost home. Kiana startled awake, instantly alert. Any word from the office? David's called 4 times. Says it's urgent we meet as soon as we land. Naomi's voice was careful, measured. He's very concerned about our safety. Too concerned? Kiana muttered, rubbing her eyes. Where was that concern when we were actually in danger? Naomi nodded slowly. Something had been nagging at her about the attack, a detail just out of reach. She closed her eyes, replaying that violent night. The masks, the precision, the way they'd known exactly when to strike. The jet touched down in Atlanta under heavy gray skies. A corporate car waited on the tarmac, more security visible in the terminal. Naomi felt the weight of eyes on her as they walked through the airport, whispers following in their wake. The attack hadn't made international news, but rumors spread fast in business circles. Ellison Global's headquarters loomed ahead, glass and steel reaching toward storm clouds. Naomi straightened her spine, ignoring the protest of bruised ribs. She wouldn't let them see her pain. The elevator ride to the executive floor was silent. When the doors opened, David Lavin stood waiting, concern etched on his polished features. Naomi, he said, stepping forward with open arms. Thank God you're safe. When we heard about the attack. She stepped past his attempted embrace, noting how his smile flickered. Save the theatrics, David. We have work to do. His pressed suit and perfect hair seemed suddenly artificial to her, a costume rather than clothing. He followed them into her office, launching into a prepared speech. The board is concerned about market stability, he said, pacing. Ming's team is pushing a narrative about cultural misunderstanding. If we apologize, smooth things over. Smooth things over? Naomi's voice could have frozen flame. They tried to kill us. We don't know it was them, David said quickly. Local police say it was probably opportunistic criminals. Criminals who knew exactly when we'd be reviewing sensitive documents? Kiana cut in. Who moved like trained fighters? David's hand went to his tie, adjusting it nervously. The motion made his sleeve ride up slightly, and Naomi's breath caught. There, partly hidden by his watch, was a healing scratch, red and recent. A memory clicked into place like a key turning in a lock. The golden cufflink she'd found in the wreckage of her hotel room. The same custom design she'd seen David wearing at last month's board meeting. Her mind raced through the implications, each revelation more damning than the last. You're right, Naomi said, keeping her voice steady through sheer will. We need to handle this carefully. Give me the weekend to review our options. Relief flooded David's face. He hadn't noticed her staring at his wrist. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. We can draft a statement, maybe arrange a private meeting with Ming. Monday? She cut him off. We'll discuss everything Monday. After he left, Kiana turned to her. You saw something. His wrist. Naomi's hands clenched the edge of her desk. And I remember something else now. During the attack, one of them hesitated when I swung the lamp, pulling back instead of following through, like he didn't really want to hurt me. Understanding dawned on Kiana's face. You think David was there in Beijing? I think David's been playing both sides for a while. Naomi opened her laptop, her fingers flying across the keys. Those patent changes didn't happen by accident. The attack wasn't just about stopping us from exposing Zhao's corruption. It was about destroying evidence of David's involvement. They worked through the evening, sending the security team home to avoid suspicion. Thunder rolled outside as night fell, rain lashing against the windows. Naomi's cybersecurity team had given her specialized tools for emergencies, programs that could crack encrypted emails without leaving traces. There, Kiana said at last, pointing to her screen. Hidden account routing through servers in Singapore. Naomi's jaw tightened as she read. Dozens of messages between David and Ming stretching back months. Plans to manipulate contract terms. Warnings about her investigation. Details about her schedule in Beijing. She's too dangerous to control. Naomi read aloud, her voice hard as steel. The parent company won't act. We need to handle this ourselves. The final email was dated the night before the attack. David's response was simple. Whatever it takes. Rain drummed against the windows as Naomi stared at the evidence of betrayal. Her CFO, someone she trusted, promoted, defended to the board, had conspired with Ming to destroy her. He had been in that hotel room, watching as his hired thugs tried to terrorize her into silence. Send copies to secure storage, she told Kiana. Then contact legal quietly. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating their reflections in the dark windows. In that stark moment, Naomi saw herself clearly. No longer the poised CEO trying to work within the system, but a warrior who'd been forced to fight. David and Ming had chosen violence over respect, betrayal over honor. She touched the bruises hidden beneath her sleeve, feeling each one like a brand of resolve. They'd thought her soft, thought they could break her with fists and fear. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. The Atlanta skyline glittered through the wall of windows in Naomi's office, a constellation of city lights stretching into the midnight darkness. She stood at the glass, hands clasped behind her back, watching her reflection overlay the urban landscape below. The bruises from Beijing had begun to fade, but the memory of that violence remained sharp as broken glass. Kiana sat at the conference table behind her, surrounded by laptops and tablets, her fingers moving across keyboards with practiced precision. Empty coffee cups and takeout containers testified to the hours they'd spent building their case. The summit's scheduled for Thursday, Kiana said, checking her tablet. Every major financial network will broadcast live. Ming's people are already confirming their attendance. They think it's your surrender speech. Naomi turned from the window, a slight smile touching her lips. They always underestimate what they fear. That's their weakness. She moved to the table, each step measured and deliberate. Her heels clicked against the hardwood floor as she reached for a tablet, reviewing their gathered evidence. The screen displayed a folder structure that represented months of careful documentation. Financial records, email chains, surveillance footage, and audio files, all meticulously organized. Walk me through the presentation order again, Naomi said, settling into her chair. Kiana pulled up a timeline on the main screen. We open with the partnership proposal, everything clean and above board. Then we show the altered contract terms David secretly inserted. She swiped to the next slide. That leads us to the money trail. Shell companies, hidden accounts, the works, and the labor violations documented with photos, witness statements, and satellite imagery. Kiana's voice hardened. They can't deny what we caught from space. Naomi nodded, scrolling through secure folders on her laptop. She'd built redundant backups of everything, stored in different locations around the world. After the attack in Beijing, she'd learned the value of paranoid preparation. The key is timing, Naomi said, pulling up another file. We need to control the narrative from the first moment. No time for their spin doctors to react. They spent the next hour fine-tuning the presentation sequence. Each revelation would build on the last, constructing an irrefutable case of corruption, racism, and violence. The evidence would unspool like a perfectly orchestrated symphony of justice. What about the audio? Kiana asked quietly. Naomi opened a secured file labeled only with a timestamp. The waveform appeared on screen, spikes and valleys representing Ming's voice at the fatal dinner. His Mandarin slur, preserved in pristine digital clarity, weighted like a loaded weapon. We save it for the end, Naomi said, studying the audio pattern. After we've shown the corruption, the theft attempts, the attack, let them see the rot at their core before we expose the hatred in their hearts. She thought about her mother, who'd spent decades cleaning other people's houses with quiet dignity, who'd taught her that education was armor, that excellence was revenge, that patience was power. The memory of Ming's sneering face floated in her mind. His casual cruelty, his assumption of superiority. Check the investor list again, Naomi instructed, pushing the memory aside. I want to know exactly who will be in that room. Kiana pulled up profiles on her tablet. Most of the major funds confirmed: European pension managers, Gulf state sovereign wealth representatives, Asian development banks. She paused, scrolling. Even the Chinese State Investment Corporation. Good. Naomi stood, walking to a whiteboard covered in flowcharts and connections. They need to see this isn't about East versus West. It's about right versus wrong, truth versus lies. They spent another hour pressure testing their strategy, examining every possible counterargument or technical glitch. Naomi had learned long ago that excellence required obsessive attention to detail. No one ever gave her the benefit of the doubt. She had to be perfect. Server redundancy? She asked, reviewing their checklist. Triple backup, Kiana confirmed. If they try to cut the feed, we have instant failovers ready, and hard copies of everything will be under each seat in sealed envelopes. Naomi allowed herself a small smile. They'd thought her soft, thought they could bully her into silence. Instead, they taught her to be bulletproof. The city lights continued their silent dance beyond the windows. As midnight deepened toward dawn, Naomi returned to her laptop, opening the audio file one last time. She adjusted her headphones, wanting to be absolutely certain of the quality. Ming's voice filled her ears, the Mandarin syllables precise and poisonous. Hey, Nu Yong Ren, black servant. She could hear the smirk in his voice, the absolute certainty of his superiority. In the background, nervous laughter rippled from his audience of sycophants and cowards. Naomi's finger hovered over the trackpad, her reflection in the screen steady and resolute. The woman looking back at her wasn't angry anymore. She was focused, determined, unstoppable. She transformed their hatred into fuel, their violence into purpose. The audio waves pulsed on screen, waiting to be unleashed. One click would start an avalanche that would bury Ming, David, and their entire corrupt empire. Not with fury or vengeance, but with truth and unshakable evidence. She pressed play once, listening to the slur again. Then she closed the laptop with a quiet click. Tomorrow, she said, her voice carrying the weight of certainty. They kneel. The video wall in Naomi's executive conference room displayed a grid of faces. Power brokers and kingmakers from every corner of the global finance world. Their expressions ranged from polite interest to barely concealed boredom. They thought they were here to witness her capitulation, her career's quiet death. Naomi stood before the cameras in a crisp white suit, her posture relaxed but commanding. Kiana sat off-camera, monitoring the technical feeds and backup systems. The morning sun streamed through the windows, casting a golden glow across the polished conference table. Thank you all for joining us. Naomi began, her voice steady and clear. I've called this summit to address recent events and share some crucial information about the proposed Zhao Industries partnership. Ming's face appeared in one of the larger video panels, broadcasting from his father's ornate office in Beijing. He wore a practiced smile, probably expecting her to apologize, to beg forgiveness for her emotional outburst. Chairman Zhao sat behind him, face impassive as stone. "Let's begin with the original partnership agreement," Naomi said, sharing her screen. The contract appeared, its terms highlighted in blue. "This was the version we initially discussed." She clicked forward. "And these are the alterations secretly inserted the night before signing." New text appeared, marked in red. "Notice the changed patent transfer clauses, the modified ownership structures." Murmurs rippled through the virtual gathering. Ming's smile flickered but held. "Our investigation revealed these changes were designed to facilitate illegal technology transfers through a network of shell companies." Another click brought up a complex web of financial flows. This structure, centered around Oceanbright Holdings Limited, connects directly to accounts controlled by Xiaoying. The murmurs grew louder. Ming's smile vanished entirely. "But this was just the surface," Naomi continued, her pace measured and relentless. "Our team uncovered systematic fraud dating back years." She began sharing document after document. Forged audit reports, falsified safety inspections, bribery payments disguised as consulting fees. These transfers, she highlighted a series of transactions, show payments to government officials through offshore accounts. The dates correspond exactly with approved permits for facilities that failed environmental impact assessments. Chairman Zhao finally stirred, leaning forward to whisper something to Ming. But Naomi was already moving to her next revelation. "We also discovered evidence of forced labor at multiple Zhao facilities." Satellite photos appeared, along with internal memos and witness testimonies. Workers held against their will, passports confiscated, living in monitored dormitories. The investors' faces had transformed from boredom to shock to growing anger. Ming was typing frantically on his phone, probably trying to contact his damage control team. "When we discovered these irregularities," Naomi said, her voice taking on an edge of steel, "I raised concerns at a private dinner." The response was illuminating. Her finger hovered over the keyboard. In the brief pause, she met Ming's eyes through the screen. His face had gone pale, realization dawning too late. She pressed play. Ming's voice filled the conference room, his Mandarin words precise and poisonous. "Hey, New Yongren." The slur hung in the air like smoke. Then came the ripple of nervous laughter, the sound of glasses clinking, the moment of casual cruelty captured in perfect digital clarity. Naomi let the recording play to its end. Then she switched to Mandarin, her pronunciation flawless. "You called me servant. Now serve your shame." The reaction was immediate and devastating. Investors began disconnecting one by one, their video panels going dark like lights being extinguished. Those who remained wore expressions of disgust and fury. On the financial ticker running along the bottom of the video wall, Zhao Industries stock began to plummet. The numbers fell faster with each passing second, millions in value vanishing like mist in sunlight. Ming's face had gone from pale to ashen. Behind him, Chairman Zhao stood slowly, his expression a mask of contained rage. He reached for Ming's shoulder, his grip visibly tight even through the video feed. "The complete evidence package has been transmitted to relevant regulatory authorities in 12 countries," Naomi stated, switching back to English. "You'll find copies in your secure inboxes, along with documentation of which agencies have been notified." Another wave of disconnections followed. The stock price continued its freefall. "This concludes our presentation," Naomi said. "Thank you for your time." She reached for the disconnect button, pausing for one final moment to meet Ming's devastated gaze. In his eyes, she saw the ruins of his empire, the ashes of his arrogance. Then she pressed the button, and his face vanished into digital darkness. The room fell silent except for the soft hum of electronics. Naomi stood motionless for a moment, feeling the weight of what she'd just accomplished settling around her shoulders. Years of corruption exposed, decades of privilege shattered, all with the simple power of truth. She drew in a deep breath, then released it slowly. That's one empire gone, she whispered. Kiana began shutting down the systems, closing laptops and powering down screens. The morning sun still streamed through the windows, but it felt different now, cleaner somehow, as if the light itself had been purified by what had just transpired. The stock ticker continued its relentless descent, marking the destruction of billions in market value. But for Naomi, the numbers were secondary. She'd done what she'd set out to do, not just protect her company, but strike a blow against the kind of casual hatred that had haunted her entire career. She reached for her water glass, took a small sip, and watched as the financial world absorbed the shock waves of what she'd just unleashed. In Beijing, phones would be ringing, lawyers would be scrambling, and Ming would be facing his father's wrath. But here in Atlanta, in this quiet conference room, Naomi had finally proven what her mother had always taught her. Excellence truly was the best revenge. The first video appeared just 3 hours after the summit ended. Shaky footage showed what looked like Naomi shoving a Chinese staff member during her Beijing visit. By noon, dozens more had surfaced. All grainy, all misleading, all carefully edited to paint her as volatile and aggressive. Naomi stood at her office window, watching dark clouds gather over Atlanta's skyline. Her phone buzzed constantly with notifications, each one bringing a fresh wave of anonymous hatred. The messages ranged from racial slurs to detailed death threats, filling her inbox like poison. "They're using deep fakes," Kiana said from her desk, scrolling through the latest batch of videos. "Good ones, but they're fake. Look at how your shoulder clips through the wall in this one." "Save everything," Naomi replied, her voice calm despite the storm brewing both outside and online. "Every threat, every video, every comment. We'll need it all." Her computer chimed with an urgent email notification. The subject line read, "Internal memo, Ellison Global Corruption Exposed." The sender was listed as anonymous whistleblower, but Naomi knew better. She'd recognize David Lavin's writing style anywhere. The attached documents were masterfully crafted. Memos that seemed to show her approving illegal payments, backdated emails discussing technology theft, even a fake recording of her planning to sabotage the Zhao deal from the start. It was the kind of paper trail that could destroy careers, the kind that took weeks to prepare. "He's been planning this," Naomi said, forwarding the files to her secure server. "These forgeries are too good for rush work. David's been Ming's inside man all along." Kiana moved to Naomi's computer, examining the documents. The metadata shows some of these were created months ago. He's been building this trap since before the Beijing trip, and now he thinks he's sprung it. Naomi pulled up a different folder on her screen, one containing every email David had ever sent from his corporate account, including the ones he thought he'd deleted. "But I've been building my own trap, too." She opened the first email chain between David and Ming, dated 6 months earlier. The messages started innocently enough, casual business discussions, harmless information sharing, but they grew darker over time, more explicit in their planning. The final exchanges discussed exact dollar amounts for David's cooperation, offshore account numbers, and detailed instructions for sabotaging Naomi's position. "Send it all to the FBI," Naomi instructed. "Every email, every attachment, every deleted draft, and copy the SEC on everything related to the stock manipulation they planned." Kiana's fingers flew across the keyboard, transmitting years of evidence to federal authorities. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky as the storm finally broke. David's office door opened across the hall. He emerged wearing his usual polished smile, straightening his tie as he walked toward Naomi's door. She could see the confidence in his stride. He thought he had her cornered. "Naomi," he said, entering without knocking, "we need to discuss damage control. These allegations are extremely serious." She turned from the window slowly, letting him see her complete lack of concern. "Yes, they are, especially the federal ones." His smile flickered. "Federal? The FBI's Cybercrimes Division is particularly interested in your conversations with Ming about hacking our servers." She picked up her phone, showing him the screen. "They just confirmed receipt of all the evidence. They're very efficient." The color drained from David's face. "Those emails were deleted." Nothing's ever really deleted, David. You taught me that, remember? Back when you were still pretending to be my mentor instead of Ming's puppet. Heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway. 2 FBI agents appeared in the doorway, their badges gleaming. Behind them stood several uniformed police officers. David Lavin, one agent said. We need you to come with us. David's mask of corporate calm shattered completely. This is ridiculous. I'm the CFO of this company. You can't just. They can and they will. Naomi cut in. Corporate espionage, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit cybercrime. Those are federal charges, David. And that's before we get to the attempted theft of classified green energy patents. The agents moved forward, handcuffs ready. David backed away, looking desperately around the room as if seeking escape. You don't understand. They made me do it. Ming said. Save it for your testimony, the agent said, securing the cuffs around David's wrists. You'll have plenty of time to explain everything. Camera flashes began popping through the windows as David was led out. News vans had already gathered below, tipped off about the FBI's arrival. The whole world would see David Lavin's walk of shame. Naomi stood at her window, watching as they guided him through the gauntlet of reporters. His perfectly tailored suit looked wrong somehow with his hands cuffed behind his back. More flashes lit up the scene despite the rain, capturing his downfall for tomorrow's headlines. She didn't blink once as she watched him being placed in the FBI vehicle. This was what justice looked like. Not loud or dramatic, but methodical and inescapable. All those years of David's subtle condescension, his hidden prejudices barely masked by corporate politeness, had led to this moment. The car pulled away, leaving only rain-soaked reporters and their disappointed cameras. Naomi remained at the window, her reflection calm and steady in the glass. In less than a day, she toppled a corrupt empire in Beijing and exposed a traitor in her own ranks. But she knew this wasn't the end. Power never surrendered quietly, and wounded predators were the most dangerous kind. Streetlights cast long shadows across the empty Atlanta roads as Naomi guided her Mercedes through the quiet night. The day's victory felt distant now, replaced by a familiar weariness that had followed her since Beijing. Her hands gripped the steering wheel firmly, eyes constantly checking the rearview mirror, a habit she developed since the hotel attack. The digital clock on her dashboard read 11:43 p.m. Most of the office buildings around her were dark, their windows reflecting the occasional flash of her taillights. She'd stayed late, finalizing statements about David's arrest, making sure every word was precise, unassailable. Movement in her mirror caught her attention. Headlights high and aggressive, belonging to a black SUV that had turned onto the street behind her. Something about its presence made her skin prickle. The vehicle kept pace, maintaining the same distance for 3 blocks straight. Naomi took a right turn, then another, mapping escape routes in her mind. The SUV followed each move. Her suspicion hardened into certainty. This wasn't coincidence. Her foot pressed heavier on the gas pedal, but she kept her speed just under suspicious. No need to attract police attention, not when she needed mobility. The SUV suddenly accelerated, closing the gap between them. Its headlights filled her mirrors, bright enough to be blinding. Naomi's pulse quickened, but her movements remained controlled, deliberate. She'd faced worse than tailgaters. They approached an intersection where the road widened into 4 lanes. The SUV swerved into the left lane, pulling alongside her. Naomi caught a glimpse of dark figures inside, faces hidden in shadow. The vehicle surged forward, cutting sharply across her path. Tires screeched as Naomi hit the brakes. Her Mercedes skidded, stopping inches from the SUV's rear bumper. Before she could reverse, 2 men emerged from the vehicle. Their movements were practiced, purposeful. One carried a tire iron that gleamed dully under the streetlights. Time seemed to slow. Naomi saw every detail with crystalline clarity. The men's black gloves, their featureless dark clothing, the way they spread out to approach from both sides. She remembered the hotel room in Beijing, the sound of breaking glass, the feeling of being cornered. Not this time. Her foot slammed the accelerator before they could reach her doors. The Mercedes's engine roared to life, tires spinning against wet pavement. She yanked the wheel hard, aiming for the narrow gap between the SUV and the curb. Metal screamed against metal as her car scraped past their bumper. The impact sent her vehicle into a spin. Naomi turned into it, using the momentum to whip her car around 180 degrees. Her training from defensive driving courses took over, countersteering, maintaining control, finding her exit. The Mercedes straightened out, facing the opposite direction, and she floored it. In her rearview mirror, she saw the men scrambling back to their vehicle. Their SUV's front bumper hung loose, damaged from the collision. She took a sharp turn down a residential side street, then another, weaving through the quiet neighborhood until she was certain she'd lost them. Her hands didn't shake as she pulled out her phone and dialed Kiana's number. The call connected after 2 rings. "They're still trying to finish it," Naomi said without preamble. Her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. "Black SUV, 2 men, armed. Just tried to run me off Peachtree." "I'm calling the police," Kiana replied immediately. "Where are you now?" "Safe, heading to the Midtown precinct. Have our security team sweep my house before I go back, and get me the traffic camera footage from the last 20 minutes around Peachtree and 14th. She ended the call and drove directly to the police station. Officers were waiting outside when she arrived, Kiana's call having alerted them. They photographed the damage to her car. Silver paint scraped along the passenger side, dents in the rear quarter panel where she'd hit the SUV. Detective Sarah Martinez took her statement in an interview room that smelled of old coffee. Naomi recounted every detail with precise clarity, her voice never wavering. The detective's pen scratched across her notepad, recording times, descriptions, sequence of events. "You're remarkably calm for someone who just survived an attempted assault," Martinez observed, studying Naomi's face. "Panic doesn't solve problems," Naomi replied. "Neither does fear. I need this documented so we can prove pattern and intent when you catch them." The detective nodded slowly. "This connects to the Beijing incident and today's arrest. They're escalating because they're desperate." Naomi met the detective's eyes. "I won't be intimidated into silence. Not by Ming, not by David, not by hired thugs in an SUV." It was nearly 2 a.m. when she finally returned home. Her security team had swept the property twice, installed additional cameras, and positioned themselves strategically around the perimeter. Guards stood watch at key points around the perimeter. Naomi walked through her front door alone, not wanting anyone to escort her inside. This was her sanctuary, and she refused to let fear dictate how she lived within its walls. In her bedroom, Naomi changed out of her power suit, carefully hanging it up despite the lateness of the hour. The ritual helped calm her racing thoughts, bringing her focus back to the rhythm of her breath. She opened her safe and retrieved a matte black pistol, a Glock 19, chosen for its legendary reliability and pinpoint accuracy. The weapon felt familiar in her hand, a tool she'd hoped she would never need, but had trained with extensively nonetheless. She laid the pistol on her nightstand, double-checking that the safety was engaged and that a round was chambered, just in case. Her voice was barely audible in the stillness of the room. Never again unarmed. Sunlight flooded Naomi's home office as she examined a perplexing email that had arrived at 4:27 a.m. The message contained only flight details and a single, ominous line. "Ming seeks sanctuary in L.A. Handle with care." The sender's address was nothing more than a string of numbers, but the digital signature betrayed traces of official Chinese government protocols. She took a deliberate sip of her morning coffee, mulling over the weighty implications. The once invincible Zhao Empire was crumbling, and someone with serious clout in Beijing's power structure wanted her to be aware of Ming's desperate escape. It wasn't entirely unexpected, though. The Chinese government had always played the long game, and Ming's very public disgrace had become an embarrassment they desperately needed to contain. "Kiana," Naomi called out to her assistant, who was working diligently at a desk in the adjacent room. "Get me Special Agent Thompson at the FBI's Financial Crimes Division." Kiana appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand. Already done. He's expecting your call in 10 minutes. And that source you asked me to verify definitely came through diplomatic channels. Someone's pulling some serious strings in Beijing. Naomi nodded, unsurprised. Ming's father still has enemies from his climb to the top. Now they smell blood in the water. She rose from her chair and walked over to the window, watching her security detail patrol the grounds outside. What time does his flight land? Private jet touches down at LAX at 2:15 p.m. Pacific. He's traveling under an alias Michael Jang, but the passport photo matches. The corner of Naomi's mouth tilted upward ever so slightly. Sloppy. He's running scared. She turned back to her desk and opened her laptop. Get me everything on his known contacts in California. Business partners, property holdings, shell companies, especially anyone who might be willing to hide him. For the next hour, they meticulously constructed a detailed map of Ming's West Coast connections. The pattern quickly became obvious. He was attempting to salvage relationships with American investors, probably with the intention of rebuilding his fallen empire from abroad. But his frantic, rushed departure suggested he feared something far worse than mere financial ruin back home. At precisely 9:04 a.m., Naomi dialed Agent Thompson's secure line. His gravelly voice answered on the first ring. Dr. Ellison, I hear you've got something interesting for us. Jang enters U.S. airspace in 5 hours, she stated without preamble. He's carrying falsified travel documents and planning to meet with investors who helped him launder money through Nevada casinos last year. There was a brief pause on the line. That's very specific intelligence. Your source is reliable. Reliable enough that the Chinese government wants him caught and sent back home. They're cleaning house. Agent Thompson, Ming's not just running from bad press anymore. Give me everything you have, Thompson said. Papers rustled in the background. And Dr. Ellison, watch your back. If he's desperate enough to flee China, he might try to settle scores first. Naomi thought of the tire iron gleaming under streetlights, the chilling sound of breaking glass in Beijing. My security's been doubled since last night's attempt. Focus on catching him before he disappears into some billionaire's compound in Beverly Hills. She spent the next several hours coordinating with FBI teams, providing them with irrefutable documentation of Ming's extensive financial crimes that her investigators had painstakingly uncovered. The evidence was damning, to say the least. Wire transfers to accounts linked to known terrorist organizations, outright bribery of African officials, and the systematic theft of intellectual property on a grand scale. Ming hadn't just been arrogant. He'd been unbelievably careless, leaving a clear trail of digital fingerprints across every single nefarious scheme. At 1:45 p.m. Eastern Time, Kiana burst into the office. His plane just began its descent into LAX. FBI's in position. Naomi pulled up a secure video feed that Thompson had granted her access to. Multiple camera angles showed the private terminal where Ming's jet was scheduled to taxi. Teams of agents in full tactical gear were strategically positioned behind vehicles and buildings, completely out of sight. The sleek Gulfstream touched down right on schedule, its wheels kicking up small clouds of smoke against the bright California sunshine. It rolled to a stop near the private terminal, and for several agonizing moments, nothing happened. Then, finally, the door swung open, and a familiar figure appeared at the top of the stairs. Ming looked drastically different from the arrogant, self-assured man who had so publicly mocked her in Beijing. His designer suit was rumpled and wrinkled, his hair disheveled and unkempt. He carried nothing but a small leather briefcase, clutching it tightly as if it were a shield. As he cautiously descended the stairs, his eyes darted around nervously, desperately searching for waiting cars or friendly, welcoming faces. Instead, he was met with the sight of FBI agents emerging from every possible direction, weapons drawn and at the ready. Ming froze halfway down the stairs, his face a mask of utter disbelief and barely contained rage. Even through the grainy video feed, Naomi could clearly read his lips as he shouted in Mandarin, demanding diplomatic immunity and threatening severe consequences. The agents remained professional and efficient, quickly securing him without any unnecessary drama. One agent relieved him of the briefcase, while others expertly cuffed his wrists behind his back. Ming's protests grew increasingly louder and more desperate, but the strategically placed microphones picked up Agent Thompson's calm, authoritative response. "Mr. Xiao, you're being detained for multiple violations of international banking laws. The Chinese government has already approved your immediate deportation." Naomi closely watched Ming's face as those last few words finally registered. The color completely drained from his cheeks as the full weight of the situation crashed down upon him. He wasn't simply being arrested. He was being sent back to face whatever harsh punishment Beijing had undoubtedly prepared for his public embarrassment of the state. "Get me the footage from his arrest," she instructed Kiana. "All angles, highest resolution possible, and find out who else was on that plane with him." "Already pulling it," Kiana replied, her fingers flying expertly across her tablet. "Preliminary passenger list shows 2 private security guards and a financial advisor. All 3 are being questioned." Naomi nodded, satisfied. On her screen, agents were leading Ming toward a waiting government vehicle. His shoulders had slumped in defeat, the fight completely draining out of him as the full magnitude of his desperate situation finally sank in. Just before they ushered him into the car, he looked directly into one of the security cameras, almost as if he knew she would be watching. The Atlanta morning sun spilled its golden light across the impeccably polished floors of Ellison Global's headquarters. 6 weeks had passed since Ming's dramatic arrest, and the business world was still reeling from the far-reaching aftershocks. Naomi's heels clicked crisply against the marble as she walked purposefully through the main lobby, her pace measured and confident. The first person to notice her arrival was a young intern sorting mail near the reception desk. His eyes widened with surprise and he straightened up immediately, his hands fumbling nervously with the envelopes. Then others began to look up from their desks and computer screens. A slow, almost reverent wave of recognition rippled through the open office space. It began with a single pair of hands clapping softly, then another, until the scattered applause swelled into a thunderous, overwhelming ovation. Employees emerged from their offices and cubicles, their faces beaming with genuine admiration and respect. Some even had tears glistening in their eyes. Naomi maintained her composure, though her heart swelled with gratitude. She nodded in acknowledgement as she passed, occasionally touching a shoulder or returning a warm smile. These were the people who had stood steadfastly by her side through the darkest days, never doubting her, never wavering in their support. In her office, Kiana was already waiting with the morning briefings and a neatly stacked pile of urgent messages. "Good morning, Dr. Ellison. The latest from Beijing. Jiao Industry stock has officially been delisted. Their board of directors was dissolved yesterday, and asset liquidation begins next week." "And the chairman?" Naomi asked, settling comfortably behind her expansive desk. "Resigned in disgrace. The Chinese government's investigation uncovered decades of systemic corruption. He's currently under house arrest." Kiana's tablet chimed softly. "Oh, and Ming's federal indictment just came through, 37 counts of financial fraud, plus a slew of conspiracy charges. He's facing a potential 20 years here if Beijing ever actually lets him out of their custody." Naomi allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smile. An empire built on arrogance, torn down by its own insatiable pride. "Speaking of which," Kiana said, holding up her tablet, "every major network wants you. Good Morning America, The Today Show, 60 Minutes. They're offering primetime specials, exclusive sit-down interviews, the works." "No." Naomi's voice was firm but gentle. "They want to turn this into a spectacle, Kiana. They want the angry black woman who single-handedly brought down a dynasty. They want tears and dramatic sound bites about revenge." "But your story could inspire so many people," Kiana protested earnestly. "Young women, especially women of color. They don't need my face plastered all over TV," Naomi interrupted softly. "They need to see with their own eyes that truth still matters, that dignity and intelligence can, and will ultimately defeat violence and hate." She gestured toward the window, where the morning sun painted the Atlanta skyline in vibrant hues of gold and amber. "Let the facts speak for themselves. The plummeting stock prices, the detailed criminal charges, the damning audit reports. That's the story, not me. Kiana nodded slowly, finally understanding. They wanted a sensational spectacle. We gave them the unvarnished truth. Exactly. Naomi glanced at her watch. I'm leaving early today. There's somewhere I need to be. The drive to her mother's old neighborhood took approximately 30 minutes. The modest house where she'd spent her childhood looked remarkably different now, lovingly restored to its original 1960s charm with a fresh coat of paint and meticulously manicured flower beds. Naomi had quietly purchased it 3 years ago, keeping it as a peaceful, private retreat from the often cutthroat world of corporate life. Inside, soft afternoon light filtered gently through the delicate lace curtains that her mother had carefully hung decades ago. The furniture was mostly new, but certain cherished pieces remained untouched. The old piano where she diligently practiced her scales, the well-worn rocking chair where her mother had sat after long, grueling days spent cleaning other people's homes. Naomi moved slowly through the familiar rooms, gently touching the walls, each with its own unique story to tell. In her purse, she carried a photograph taken at the fateful banquet in Beijing. She'd had it professionally printed and framed. A moment frozen in time, captured just before Ming's humiliating insult, showing her seated proudly at the head table, her spine ramrod straight, her eyes steady and unwavering, wearing her mother's beloved pearl necklace. On the mantel, alongside other treasured family photos, stood a stark black and white image of her mother as a young woman, proudly wearing her domestic worker's uniform, but radiating an undeniable quiet dignity. Naomi carefully placed the new framed photograph beside it, the two powerful images spanning generations of struggle and unwavering triumph. She stepped back slightly, studying the visual echo between the two photographs, the same proud, unyielding posture, the same unflinching gaze that refused to be intimidated. Her mother had instilled in her the profound understanding that dignity wasn't freely given. It was something that had to be actively claimed, earned through hard work and unwavering integrity. Education and excellence, she taught her, were powerful weapons that no one could ever take away. The last golden rays of sunset filled the room with a soft, warm amber light. Naomi gently touched both frames, feeling the immense weight of her family's legacy in her fingertips. They used fists, she whispered to the quiet house, to her mother's enduring memory, to her own determined reflection in the glass. We used truth, and when that failed, we used strength. The words settled into the peaceful air like a final, essential piece clicking perfectly into place. Naomi gathered her belongings, took one last lingering look at the photographs, and walked purposefully toward the door. The security system beeped softly as she entered the code, and the lock clicked shut with satisfying finality. Outside, the cheerful chirping of crickets filled the warm Georgia evening air. Her heels made soft, rhythmic sounds on the brick path as she walked confidently toward her car, her stride steady and sure, moving forward, as she always had, one purposeful step at a time, unafraid, unbroken, and ultimately unstoppable in her quiet, unwavering power.